Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the next symposium. We are joined by Jochen Profit. Jochen, how are you?
I'm good. Ben and Daphne, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan.
We're a big fan.
It means a lot.
Yeah.
We were just talking about your work with Daphne that you wrote about teamwork in the NICU and the relationship between that and a soccer team.
I told you
or a
would
football
like
team.
it.
I mean, this is transfer window season. So,
Well, this was the pinnacle of my academic career. It's all downhill from here. But I had set my mind to writing at least one article about neonatology and soccer. So yeah, I managed to do that. So
very cool. And so, what are the parallels in your opinion?
Well, I think in the job we do, we work in a team. Mm-hmm. Like we as physicians only really have like that a certain degree of influence over what happens to our patients, and so I think we can learn a lot from team sports.
Right.
You know, how to work together, how to create teams that are highly functioning. I think that takes technical expertise as well as the ability to communicate, to be kind, to have foresight into what's going to happen next, and to kind of practice together on in a way that we usually don't do, I think, in the NICU. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I think those are skills that are not well taught throughout our medical education, but very necessary to run a team.
Yeah, no, we had a little project with a summer student. It never quite ended up taking off, but I sort of loved it. We had the coach of the Stanford soccer team, whose wife is an obstetrician, and so he was kind of interested in the neonatal space anyways, and he kind of joined us on rounds a couple of times. And
awesome.
And in his team, I think Stanford was national champion for like several years in a row. There's a number of years ago now, so I don't recall the exact years. But he had this sort of growth mindset approach to his players, where really he told us he would tell his players when they come start play, it's like, I don't know if we're going to win a championship or anything like that, but I'll promise you that if you do everything we do here in practice and training, I'll make you a better player by the end of the 4 years of college. And so, through their sort of daily practice, review of practice, he was able to really achieve a lot of success. Sort of having this sort of like open mindset that you can always improve, that you're not just kind of like where you are, but you can take this approach and really like up your level and up your game, and I think we can learn something from that in neonatology.
Yeah.
I think this discussion about teamwork is totally relevant to the session that you moderated yesterday, Lessons from Centers Working to Reduce NEC, because it's all about collaboration. I think some of the points that were discussed during that session. So what should we have learned in that session?
I think there's a number of things, like many years ago, I feel like, we had actually done sort of a review of all the metrics of quality and tried to figure out which quality measure is a good measure of which represents like quality in your NICU. And necrotizing colitis was like one of them at that time, and most of the experts that we kind of asked about this said like, we just don't really know what to do about it. So, it's not really whether you have a low or a high rate of necrotizing colitis isn't a good marker of quality. And I think there's been, over the last maybe 10 years, there's been more and more studies coming out that show that sort of routine quality improvement practices can actually quite dramatically improve necrotizing colitis, even though the evidence around the individual interventions is maybe not as great as we would want it to be. And so, like when we looked at California through the California Perinatal Quality Care Collaborative, and one of our former fellows actually did that study, we found that essentially we've reduced necrotizing colitis in California by almost 50% over the past decade.
Wow.
And, there hasn't really been sort of a new magic bullet. There's been a lot of focus on breast milk feeding, I'm sure, and that we think had sort of 50% to do with the improvement maybe. But The other 50%, we don't really know. Is it standardized approaches, more milk, more kangaroo care? We don't really know. But we've made steady progress. We've chipped away at the problem. We're far away from a world without neck. But I think the main lesson is that QI approaches can work, even if the evidence is not as strong as we would like it to be.
That's super interesting, because if I understand correctly, measuring the outcome as the rates of neck is sort of a very crude. It should be perceived as a crude measure, and instead we should look at all these other interventions that could potentially prevent neck, and then look at that and how consistent and effective are we in implementing those.
Yeah, I think like one of the quality improvement paradigms actually is that you can achieve improvement even if you don't do the right thing. Like just by people being consistent about what they do, you have a chance to understand what is happening in your unit. Because if there's too much variability, everybody kind of has their own approach to solving a problem. And we all, like all docs are kind of like smart people. The nurses are very smart. Like everybody, has reasonable like approaches to a patient. But if everybody kind of does their own thing, not everybody can be right. And you can't learn because there's just so much variation that everything just becomes a random event. And you can never like associate like one intervention with one patient's outcome. And it's like, was it related? Was it not related? We never know. But if people more often than not do the same thing, you can start to begin to understand whether something works or doesn't work for your NICU.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you're saying it's potentially more important to have a standardized approach than to necessarily overhaul your entire protocol for the newest data if there's not a new recommendation or policy change.
Right. I think, having, like, I like this expression, it's called a shared baseline, like the term protocol and those kind of things. They always sound like cookbook medicine. And we often say, like, we don't want everybody to do the same thing. We want the variation in our care to be driven by the patients and not by the doctors or the nurses. So if you agree on a shared baseline, then and the patient has no reason to deviate from it, you should apply it. But if you think that your patient is in a clinical state that requires something else, then you should deviate from it. And you should teach your colleagues about why you deviated from it. It's actually, you should be constantly changing your shared baselines or guidelines, whatever you want to call them, because you should be constantly learning what works and what doesn't work. And nobody can create a perfect guideline that fits every patient. And so actually a measure of your success in your unit should be how often you adjust your guidelines based on new learnings that you achieve.
Jochen, thank you so much for dropping by. This is awesome, and we're gonna make sure to find a time slot to have you on the incubator and chat with you a bit more about this at length. So thank you for dropping by, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My pleasure.